right there. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about drawing the limbs, the legs and the arms. So what we want to do is we do not want to draw an arm, and we do not want to draw a leg. We want to draw an idea. The more fully and the more clearly, the more consistently we do that, the better our work will be. Art is a series of ideas. The way I do my art, it's a series of really beautiful ideas. I'm trying to make whatever thing I draw, every mark I make, a beautiful mark. But it's going to be an idea. So the simplest way to approach a difficult subject is, rather than drawing the mountain, draw the idea of the mountain, and the simplest idea we can have around that is draw the shape. So I'm just going to draw a shape of a mountain. If I want to get quite a bit more advanced, I'll evolve that idea from shape, which is a two-dimensional flat idea, like a shadow on the wall, to a three-dimensional form. So maybe we'll turn it into a triangle. The simpler I can make that idea, the more control I have over it. The easier it is, the less overwhelming it is. So if I can really work on my idea, what am I trying to say here? I'm not really drawing the limb, I'm drawing what? I'm going to draw a simple shape. If I can make it really, really simple, it's going to be easier. I've got the head with all the features. Oh my God. The laws of light, the deep perspective, three-point perspective, and all the features in the anatomy and the bone and the muscle and all that kind of stuff. But if I just made it a really simple idea, I could make that whole head from a front view just an ellipse. If I wanted to get a little bit more sophisticated, just an egg. And now I can do a few construction lines and place the egg in space a little bit. I can learn with a little bit of practice, still simple, but it adds a new idea of not just a shape or not just a form, but a second idea of the position of the form. Now I can have that leaning or facing or tilting, being a little underneath the face, and so on. The more we can parse that out, when we get in trouble, the more we'll get out of trouble. The more successes, we'll stack little success. Oh, I got it to lean this time. I got a little underneath it this time. I was able to really simply add a little bit of tone to the line maybe this time. Those successes stack up. Those what I call little wins stack up. And then motivation isn't a problem. Because when we win, the body, the brain rewards us. Do that again because you were safe, you were happy, you were strategic, you did something in the world that wasn't dangerous and were more likely to survive tomorrow. And we'll get these little chemical shots of feel-good chemical that'll bring us back. True love, there's two chemicals involved. In a flow state where we artists live when we're not stressed out, 5 chemicals. And it tells us, it allows us to perform at a higher level. We remember things more, we are more creative, we are more connected to the world, we're more conscious and aware of what's going on. We have more energy, more stamina. All these good things happen when we do that. And when we can build a process that is simple, like we begin to build a head and make it simple, good things happen. We're much more likely to be excited to come back to the drawing board even as we leave it. Can't wait to get back tomorrow. That's so much fun. Feels so good to do that. I'm seeing progress. So we want a process that is as simple as possible. And yet, simple isn't good enough, because this would be an even simpler way to draw the head. And this would be a very simple way to draw the rib cage. And that'd be a really simple way to draw the pelvis. And yet it wouldn't ring true, it wouldn't be very satisfying, not for very long. And so we need to balance how simple it is with how characteristic it is. Simple yet characteristic. I can't stress this enough. This is the secret sauce, the superpower that if we use this everywhere, we level up like crazy. We make it as simple as we can. That's our idea. And then we slowly evolve that idea. So it becomes more and more sophisticated, more and more nuanced, but in a simple way. We just take this shape of the head and we try again to make it a little bit more characteristic and a little bit, sometimes we'll chase after something very different. No, a little more characteristic. A little more characteristic. Oh, wait a second. A little more characteristic. Just steal a little bit of this. And then we hit that sweet spot where it feels right, it rings true. And if we can do it slowly and simply, just in curiosity, just be curious. What if I made it not just a ball, but an ellipse? What if I made it longer? What if I made it a little fatter on top and thinner on the bottom? What if I made it a little bit rounder on top and squarer on the bottom? What if, what if, what if? You're going to spend your whole career, your whole life trying to simplify things and distill it down to its essence. So with the least amount of effort and with the most amount of strategy and experience behind us, we make better and better choices. So we want to do that with the limbs. And we want to do that with every idea. I'm going to make a shape. I'm going to make it more characteristic. I'm going to add values to that shape. I'm going to make them more characteristic. I'm going to group not just the shape of the form, but the shape of the shadow on the form and make it more characteristic. And I'm going to make it more characteristic in value. I'm going to take one problem. How dark is that shadow? 3 steps later, I got more and more characteristic. Sometimes I shoot off too far in one direction or the other, but I'll, with practice, with experience, with curiosity and patience, I'll get that sweet spot. And then I can say, okay, now I've got the value of that shadow pretty good. Now I'm going to make more characteristic the shape of the shadow. And I'll iterate that 3 or 4 or 20 or 30 times until it rings true, trying to get to the essential truth of what value that shadow wants to be and what shape that shadow wants to be. And as time goes on, I'll get more and more refined in my understanding, sophisticated in my creative choices. Well, why does it have to be a curve? Why can't it be an S-curve? Now that I've got the value right, that's easy. That's simple yet characteristic of the truth I'm trying to capture as inspired by the real world. And now I'm going to just evolve the shape. In fact, really just the edge, the beginning of that shadow shape. And play with that 1 or 2 or 20 or 40 or 150 to 1,000 times over time, getting ever simpler, distilling down the idea, ever more characteristic, ringing true to the real world, or ringing true to what I want to say about the real world. Because all really wonderful artists, all the great artists, had 2 questions. What do I see about the world? What are the laws of life? What is linear perspective? What is that color of red that I'm looking at on that shirt right now? What do I see? And then we'll have a series of processes that we've stolen from the greats usually. Pretty lucky for us. What do I see? Oh, that's how they did it. And then we have a process for capturing what we see on the page of the canvas. But the really great artists have a second question. What do I see and what do I want to say about it? And if you get curious about both questions, both ideas, I see something and I have a process of discovering and capturing that something and getting it down on the surface. And then I have something I want to say about it. I have an engineer's mind for seeing the truth and understanding the systems of the world. And I have a poet's heart where there's something powerful that I can bring to that. It's not just an egg. You crack that open and it's a new life. It's born again. Maybe it's a spiritual, maybe it's a philosophical, maybe it's an emotional. So we can take the craft and the same simple yet characteristic processes and ideas that we so carefully and curiously work out over time can work not just on the craft level, but on much deeper levels, as all great art does. Not just in the head, is it right? Is it engineered correctly? But from the heart, does it emote? Does it make me feel something? Does it give me hope for the future? Does it give me a strategy for a better life? Because great art can do that too, like great systems of thought, great philosophical, or in terms of heart truth, more spiritual ideas. Simple yet characteristic. So anything I draw, we're going to look at the limbs, but anything I draw, I'm going to look with the eye to character. Now, because of YouTube's restrictions, I cannot show the actual reference, the nudes. They shut me down the last time I did that. So I'm just going to draw it. You're going to imagine that. And by the way, I'll make a little quick pitch and then we'll go back to the good stuff. I just started a Patreon page. We just got that up, I think 10 days ago, a week and a half ago, something like that. There's already a few people who found it. We'll actually do a launch and announce it to folks later. But on that, I put these recordings. I give you homework. I give you a portfolio of images and give you a description. And that's all archived. And there's, I think we have 25, 26 recordings there. We're going to keep adding things every week to it. And you can join that, support the live stream here, but also dig into these trainings as you need to. Not hear it and say, yeah, that's great, but actually apply it and practice it. Get curious about it and build it into a system into your artwork and level up your artwork. So I give you help with that on that Patreon. It's $8 a month if you want to join it. If not, hang out with the live streams, but there you will be able to put the reference. I can't do them here, unfortunately. Okay, pitch done. So when we talk about an arm, I'm going to just look at the human body and every jointed part. I'm going to consider that a separate problem, a separate idea, a separate chance to get really simple yet characteristic and practice the move between. If I got ultimately characteristic, it'd be a photorealistic piece, let's say. If I got absolutely simple, it'd be a crude childlike snowman. So I want to find that sweet spot between. And depending on what you're trying to do, the idea that you're trying to impart, what you're trying to say with that idea, you'll be more simple or more characteristic. But what I want to do for me I want to make the idea, the marks, the shapes, the values, whatever, beautiful. And I want to distill it down to the essence, whatever that means to me. It's its essential self. And that can be an emotional distillation, or in this case, just a shape design, just as a design drawing. Good drawing can, in very real ways, just be considered good design. And so I'm going to spend time designing and redesigning. And my friend here will be curiosity, two friends really, and patience. The more I can stay with that, the more I love just hitting the speed bag, swinging the bat, catching the ball, the more mixing the colors, practicing the fundamentals. The really great world-class folks don't do fancy stuff. I love some of the fancy stuff we can do in art, but they don't do that. That's not the reason they're successful. They do the fundamental things. They do the basic things. They do micro adjustments, keep trying to make it their swing more characteristic of a perfect swing. Their exercise habits more characteristic of what a healthy body needs to thrive and survive. And they slightly adjust the calories. They slightly adjust the elbow, or how they bend the knees, or how wide they set the stance. The little things. Curious and curious. Will it make it better or worse if I take a little wider stance? Will it make it better or worse if I lean into that swing or if I hold back from it? And patience. Trying it again and again and again. What I call in our course material, iterations. Creative play. And that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to draw an upper arm. Well, not really. I'm going to draw my idea about it. I'm going to make it a simple, actually, we'll make it a three-dimensional shape, but it could be three-dimensional form. It could be a two-dimensional shape. Whatever idea you want to have is perfect. We'll just work with that. It could be just contour. It could just be pointillism, dots of black ink on white paper. Just a cloud of dots that open up and close together in strategic ways, like a Seurat painting. So I'm going to draw, my idea is just going to be a simple three-dimensional form. I'm just going to draw a egg for that upper arm. In fact, I'm going to get ambitious. I'm going to draw the forearm too, upper arm and the forearm. Two forms, now two simple structures connected somehow. And then I'll ask myself, is it nice and simple? Did I feel overwhelmed trying to do it? No, it was nice and simple. Was it characteristic? Does it ring true of that arm I imagine or that arm I see from reference or reality? No, not so characteristic. So I'll try again. Maybe if I make it a longer series of eggs. That's better. Maybe if I add more eggs into it for the chubby parts. That's pretty good. Still not characteristic enough. Maybe if I switch shapes to a cylinder. I was just curious and I stuck with it for a few minutes, for a few iterations. I tried and tried again, and maybe I tried not 2 times, but 22 times. If I can be patient and curious, is it better when I do that slightly new thing, stretch the egg or add an extra egg or two, or is it worse? And then I try again. I play like a little kid. What if? What if the G.I. Joe and the Legos played together? They lived in the same world. They were all trying to defeat the same enemy that lived in this sandcastle over here. What if? Just curious play. And then we get to let's do it this way. like so. That's better, I think, but probably it should be a little longer. And probably if I connected those things on the outside corner and not disconnected them, that would ring more true. That's better. And we keep iterating and keep being curious. What if I connected on the outside corner and made the tube a tapering tube for the forearm? Better yet. Maybe not so fat here. Better yet. And then we'll come to a truth eventually by creative play that if I take any of these forms of the body and it's not in a symmetrical form, what's here is over here, what's here is over here, but it's asymmetrical, what is here is different than over here, or it's in an asymmetrical position, I'm going to tend to find that it curves. And that's one of the secrets when we draw our simple yet characteristic shapes. If we can have them curve in the long axis, what we call gesture, now it starts to feel alive because it starts to get a little watery. Now the contour itself gets watery, but so does the overall design of the limb, and oftentimes several body parts together, and sometimes several figures in the composition. All off this long axis curve. It's more characteristic. It brings now nothing really more complicated, just more characteristic tube. Not a stiff tube, it's a curved tube. And it's not a flat tube, it's now a tube that I'm slightly underneath. Or maybe it would be more characteristic if I saw it slightly on top. And then I'm going to use that characteristic idea that I learned at the simplest stage, connect on the outside corner where it's a nice clean and not wadded up with material, and the tapering tube, and keep iterating again and again and again. And we're shortcutting the process here for time. Keep iterating. I would not correct this here as I'm doing. I would do a brand new drawing and correct it. And then I keep refining. And throughout my career, I'll make simpler and simpler distillation of all the stuff out there into a very simple and yet ever more characteristic choice. And that's when that mastery starts to happen, when you can make it both simple and characteristic. When I can have my own life with my own unique wants and needs and desires, and yet fulfill the community around me and be a good member of that community. Two opposing energies of separate and free and grouped and committed, and finding the balance between. There's never a perfect balance. It's always changing. It can always be better. We can always be more conscious. We can always distill it down or simplify it or make it more characteristic or give a little bit more or take a little more, back and forth. But that's the energy of our life and of our art. Finding that. So with that thinking in mind, here's the general construction of the limbs. How are we doing on time? We got a few minutes here. And let me check with you guys. How are you doing there? Are you still with me? I think you're still with me. Good. That's a good thing. So if we look at the upper arm, we'll find that if we think of it as a tube, it seems more characteristic if we make it a tube that's bulging, and specifically bulging usually, not every time, there's no always in life, but usually bulging on the long axis, this way, the long axis. The long axis, see how it curves this way on the Oops, come back. There we go. Long axis. And I'll show you the rule for that. Because the fact is, if we looked at the actual arm and didn't make it simple, but made it way more characteristic, we'd have on the outside, here's going to be the inside of the arm here. Crook of the arm, connection of the chest, shoulder, same here. So we got the shoulder. We'll just draw the contour. Very characteristic. Pretend I'm doing a good job of this. And we'll see the shoulder bulge, the tricep bulge, and the little elbow maybe bulge. And then on the inside, we'll see the shoulder bulge and the shoulder bulge, the bicep bulge, and the wadded up material of the forearm bulging. And if we looked at that and really made it more characteristic, more careful, we'd notice that the bulge of the bicep is usually, not always, but usually shorter than the bulge. Switch colors here. Come on, there you go. Then the bulge of the tricep. Tricep lasts longer. And so the rule I use, if I want to take this very characteristic structure or thing, the upper arm, and distill it down so I can call out one long axis curve, I won't look at the fullest curve. A bicep might be doing that. I won't look at the fullest, most bulging curve. I'll look for the longest sustained curve. And that will, the longest sustained curve, if we cut off all the lumps and bumps, gives us the overall curve of the structure. Cut all the lumps and bumps off. Longest sustained structure. So later we can make this even more characteristic by adding the bulging contours or the secondary smaller structures on top of the primary bigger structures. And if I know that the longest sustained curve defines the gesture, the beautiful, fluid, graceful, lovely quality of life that's energetic, then I might more carefully and ever so slightly maybe, or not so slightly, redesign that so that the tricep is longer, a longer sustained curve before it wobbles into the elbow and wobbles into the deltoid. And that will make it even more beautiful and graceful. And I might even decide to play down the bulging bicep so it doesn't subvert so much this beautiful long axis curve. Because notice if I draw an egg, the side of the egg is canceled out by the other side of the egg. The long axis of an egg is not curved. It's ironic. The most curved shape or structure in nature has no curved design. It's symmetrical. The torso, the head, symmetrical. Only when you get an asymmetrical position, or the curve on this side, if there is one, is different, asymmetrical to the curve on this side if there is one, then it becomes beautifully, fluidly curved and feeling more alive. And we can have one side not curve at all and let the other side curve, and it would still have a net curved design. We want that when we can find it, because that will bring things alive. So always look to the longest sustained curve to find the gesture, and then make a simple yet characteristic version by cutting off the lumps and bumps usually and putting them on later whenever you want. So the upper arm, the gesture is usually on the tricep side. Not always, but usually. Let's do it again. And then we'll add the forearm. And we'll notice that the elbow acts as a corner for that jointed part. So I'm going to have a gesture for the upper arm. I'll have a gesture for the lower arm, the forearm. And what I'll probably find, almost always, but not always, that the longest sustained curve is also on the elbow side, just like the tricep lasted longest. The extensor group and not the flexor group, flexor, extend. The extensor side, not the flexor side, that's doing that. This is the longest sustained curve, and then maybe it goes into the wrist like that. So the lump, in some manner or form, this is almost always going to be the longest sustained curve. Goes from here to here maybe. This only goes from here to here. Notice that both the upper arm and the forearm are curving on the elbow side. So if we can see the elbow on top, both upper arm and lower arm will curve down. If we see the elbow down, both upper arm and lower arm will curve up. And if we're in here where the elbow is in between the contours, if the elbow is closer to the bottom, then the arms will curve up. If it's closer to the top, it'll curve down. If it's right at the top, it curves down. If it's right at the bottom, it curves up. So we can use that elbow test to get a quick read on that. And then if we're curious and patient, and we're not sure, we don't remember, we'll just try different iterations and just get curious. Okay, there's the tricep here. Here's the elbow. Does that ring true? Does that feel right? Or does it feel wrong? Well, maybe if I make it straighter this time, maybe if I reverse the curve. Ah, there it is. Just curious and patient. The world-class folks out there, the athletes, the entrepreneurs, the whatever discipline, are incredibly patient. They know whatever they're doing now, if they keep doing that over the long run, not for the next 10 minutes, but for the next 10 years, their business will thrive. Their team will win. They'll become masters of their craft because they stay curious and patient and do little micro adjustments, a little less curved, a little reversing the curve one way rather than sticking with it curving the other, and stay with it at that simple stage before they render, before they add the little stuff, they get the big stuff right. And as they stay curious and patient over time, their understanding of what a true well-constructed arm is, or a true feeling of depth in space in a landscape is, they become more refined. And the truth of their discipline, the truth of their work becomes truer yet, becomes more descriptive, more distilled down, more essentially right just by patience. And if I can't do it out of my head, if I can't do it from reference, I can do drawovers and lay tracing paper, lay a digital layer over that reference, that old master, that photograph, and try it there. And so I can sketch this out over that beautiful contour of that particular wonderful slice of reality or invented reality. And I can look at, if I can't draw it freehand, I can look at Mary's arm and baby Jesus' arm and that poor broken neck of that poor sheep is getting abused there, and feel the beautiful curve and the life energy, the forearm of Anne, the curve of the head into the neck, the move forward of the face with the neck, grouping into this wonderful rhythm, this wonderful energy, this wonderful connectivity as she pushes forward with a loving gaze, all flowing in this alignment, distilling down to the essence, the energetic truth, the energy and then the matter, the gesture and then the structure. So upper arm, forearm, and of course that forearm, as we said before, is not just curving at the elbow. Off the elbow. It's not a curve just coming off the corner. Corners are wonderful landmarks to begin. Easy to, once they're placed with a little bit of reference, easy to adjust and refine. More characteristic position of that elbow. But not only curve, but of course it's a tapering curve. And we can iterate and do it drawing by drawing how tapered it is, how wide it is in the beginning, and how narrow it is at the end. And maybe keep layering on how wide to how narrow, and how far to the left in the beginning, and how far to the right at the end. And keep iterating and testing and playing with that until it rings true and you get that aha moment. Yeah, that's right, that's it. And maybe how round it is at the beginning and how squarish it is at the end. And so we can keep making it more characteristic by stacking ideas on top, and how dark it is at the shadow, and how light it is in the lights. And slowly build a more distilled down, a more truthful, more nuanced representation of the real, or not really the real, my imagination of the real. Because after all, we all work from imagination. I look at the model and I see that, and then I go to draw, and I'm working from my memory, my imagination of the real world, and not the real world itself. And so everything I do is this fantastic fantasy world with its own set of rules, sometimes right in line with the real world, sometimes very different. There actually is line in my imaginary world. There is no line in nature, no true line, and so on. So that's the upper arm. And I think we will save the leg, since we're at the 40-minute mark, we'll save the legs for next week, work on the leg, and then I'll find some strategic reference next time, get a little bit on screen maybe for it, so we can see what we see and work with what we want to work with more completely. All right, my friends, let me pop over real quick Is there any quick questions? I'll give a couple minutes for questions here. And I know we have a delay, so I will wait. I'll sing to you while I'm waiting. No, I won't. You wouldn't like that. I'll just wait. Little bad streaming. We got to work on that. Our Montana internet has been terrible. I really apologize for that. It's been bad. Even Mike, my partner, who's got high speed internet that's great, he said it's been a little slow for him. Anyway, we'll try and fix that. Luckily, the recordings don't lag, so those are fully good quality there. All right. So, any last questions, or we just have a tough internet? Going. Gone. Okay. Well, we will see you next time, and we're going to keep. Thank you for your patience and your attendance and your passion for art, of course, all that good stuff. We're going to keep working on the technology side of this, try and get cleaner streams and a little bit better setups on our end and refine it. But we're on a learning curve, so thanks for being patient with us, and we will see you all next time. And go make something beautiful this week in your life. Add a little beauty to your life, add a little beauty to your world, and we'll see you next time.